the lead investigator at Skinwalker Ranch, has just quit.
What we captured on those cameras wasn't just unexplained. It was aware. It knew we were there. It knew where every camera was positioned. With that being said, I am leaving Skinwalker Ranch.
Dr. Travis Taylor, one of the most credentialed scientists in America, multiple doctorates, decades working on classified government projects, the lead investigator at Skinwalker Ranch, has just quit after viewing footage that showed something so disturbing, so unexplainable, that he walked away from the most mysterious location on Earth. And Brandon Fugal's response is raising even more questions than answers. Dr. Travis S. Taylor holds not one, not two, but multiple advanced degrees from major universities. We're talking about a doctorate in optical science and engineering, a separate doctorate in aerospace systems engineering, a master's degree in physics, a master's degree in astronomy, and a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. This man has spent his entire adult life studying the most complex and challenging problems in science and engineering. But his credentials go far beyond just academic achievements. Travis has worked extensively for the United States Department of Defense on classified projects that the public will never know the details of. He's consulted for NASA on cutting-edge aerospace programs. He's been involved in developing advanced propulsion systems, weapons technology, and surveillance systems that remain classified to this day. He holds security clearances that grant him access to some of the most sensitive information in the United States government. He's authored over 25 peer-reviewed scientific papers published in major journals. He's written technical documents for government agencies that will never be declassified. He's appeared on legitimate science programs like The Universe and Rocket City Rednecks, where he explained complex physics and engineering concepts to general audiences. His reputation in the scientific and defense communities is stellar. This is not someone who jumps to conclusions or gets easily fooled by ambiguous evidence. When Travis Taylor joined the Skinwalker Ranch investigation team in 2020, it was a game changer for the entire operation. His involvement legitimized the project in the eyes of the broader scientific community. Suddenly, this wasn't just a fringe paranormal investigation. This was a serious scientific endeavor led by someone with the credentials and experience to back up every claim. Travis brought equipment to the ranch that most civilian researchers could only dream of accessing: sophisticated spectrum analyzers, radiation detection systems, electromagnetic field monitors, LiDAR mapping technology, and experimental sensors that aren't even available to the public yet. His approach was methodical, systematic, and deeply skeptical, which is exactly what the investigation needed. So now that you understand who Travis Taylor is and why his departure is so significant, let's talk about what actually happened. According to multiple sources close to the investigation who spoke on condition of anonymity, the incident occurred during a late-night surveillance operation in the Eastfield area of Skinwalker Ranch. Now, for those of you who follow the ranch investigations closely, you know that the Eastfield has been a hotspot for anomalous activity for years. This is the location where the team has documented some of the most intense and frequent unexplained phenomena. We're talking UAP sightings captured on multiple independent camera systems, electromagnetic disturbances powerful enough to cause complete equipment failures, strange animal behavior including cattle absolutely refusing to enter certain areas even when food is present, and multiple instances of human investigators experiencing unexplained physical symptoms ranging from nausea to temporary vision problems. The team had decided to conduct what they called a maximum coverage surveillance operation in this location. The goal was to have every possible sensor, every possible camera, every possible detection system focused on this area simultaneously, so that if anything happened, they would capture it from multiple angles with multiple types of equipment, all timestamp synchronized to the millisecond. The equipment array they deployed was absolutely massive. Infrared cameras positioned at 6 different angles around the perimeter, thermal imaging systems capable of detecting heat signatures from over a mile away, electromagnetic spectrum analyzers monitoring everything from low-frequency radio waves all the way up to gamma radiation, sensitive radiation detectors that could pick up even the slightest particle emissions, motion sensors using both passive infrared and active microwave technology, and high-definition night vision cameras recording at 4K resolution, all feeding data back to the command center in real time. The surveillance operation began at sunset, around 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Travis was positioned in the command center, which is located approximately 300 yards from the Eastfield location, monitoring all the feeds on multiple screens. Security personnel were stationed at strategic positions around the perimeter. Everyone was in radio contact. They settled in for what they expected to be a long night of careful observation. And for the first several hours, absolutely nothing unusual occurred. The equipment registered completely normal baseline readings. The electromagnetic spectrum was quiet. No thermal anomalies appeared on the infrared systems. No radiation spikes. No motion detections except for occasional wildlife passing through the area. By Skinwalker Ranch standards, it was an unusually calm and uneventful evening. Some team members were even joking that maybe the phenomena had decided to take the night off. Then, at exactly 2:47 a.m., everything changed in an instant. At 2:47 a.m., every single piece of equipment in the surveillance array registered an anomaly at the exact same moment. And I mean exact, down to the millisecond, according to the timestamp synchronization. The electromagnetic field monitors spiked to levels that should have required a massive power source somewhere in the immediate vicinity, something equivalent to a major electrical substation or a powerful military-grade radio transmitter operating at full capacity. But there was nothing there. No power lines, no vehicles, no equipment that could possibly generate that kind of electromagnetic signature. The radiation detectors surged beyond their safe operating parameters so dramatically that the systems automatically shut down to prevent damage to the sensitive instruments. The thermal imaging cameras detected a massive heat signature that didn't correspond to any known animal, any vehicle, any natural phenomenon that the team had ever documented. And the night vision cameras captured something that, according to those who have seen the footage, defies any conventional explanation. One source close to the investigation, speaking on condition of anonymity because they're not authorized to discuss the details publicly, described the footage as showing a structured object that appeared to materialize out of thin air, completely solid and three-dimensional, that hovered in a completely stationary position for approximately 30 seconds without any visible means of propulsion, support, or attachment to anything, and then dematerialized in a way that violated multiple fundamental laws of physics as we currently understand them. The object wasn't blurry, it wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't some distant light that could be explained as an aircraft or satellite. According to the descriptions, this was a solid, structured object, clearly visible on multiple camera systems simultaneously, with defined edges and what appeared to be a metallic or highly reflective surface. But here's where the incident takes an even stranger turn. What allegedly disturbed Travis the most, what ultimately became the breaking point that led to his decision to leave the project entirely, wasn't even the object itself. It was what happened immediately after the object vanished from view. The cameras captured what appeared to be a humanoid figure standing in the exact location where the object had been hovering just seconds before. And this figure didn't walk into frame from the darkness. It didn't approach from any direction that the motion sensors would have detected. It was simply there, instantly present, as if it had been deposited or left behind by whatever had just disappeared. The figure stood completely motionless for what witnesses estimate was about 5 to 7 seconds. And then, in what multiple people who've seen the footage described as one of the most unsettling and disturbing moments they've ever experienced, the figure slowly and deliberately turned its head directly toward the camera array, as if it knew exactly where every camera was positioned, as if it was fully aware that it was being watched and recorded. According to the detailed descriptions of the footage from those who have viewed it, the figure's physical proportions were fundamentally wrong in a way that immediately triggered a deep sense of wrongness in anyone watching. It was too tall, standing somewhere between 7 and 8 feet in height. The torso was too narrow, appearing almost skeletal in its proportions, and the limbs, particularly the arms, didn't move the way human limbs move. There was something about the joints, about the way they articulated or failed to articulate properly, that was profoundly disturbing to witness. Then, after those several seconds of standing completely still and staring directly at the cameras with what appeared to be deliberate awareness and intention, the figure began moving toward the camera array. But it wasn't walking, at least not in any way that resembled normal bipedal locomotion. The movement was described as unnaturally smooth and fluid, almost as if the figure was gliding or floating just slightly above the ground surface, covering distance without any visible leg movement, without any of the natural natural weight shift and balance adjustments that you would expect from any walking creature. Travis, who was monitoring all of the feeds in real time from the command center 300 yards away, immediately grabbed the radio and transmitted an urgent message to the security team positioned near the east field. Evacuate the area immediately. Get away from that location right now. But before any of the security personnel could even respond or acknowledge the transmission, something unprecedented happened. Every single camera in the array went completely dark simultaneously. Not a gradual power failure where systems shut down one by one. Not a signal interruption that might cause flickering or static. Just instant, complete, total black across every single camera system at the exact same moment, as if something had reached out and switched them all off with perfect synchronization. When the full team returned to the East Field area the following morning at first light, they found physical evidence that something extraordinary had occurred in that location. The ground where the figure had been standing, where it had materialized after the object vanished, was scorched in a perfect circular pattern approximately 8 feet in diameter. The grass within this circle was completely burned away, reduced to ash and scattered by the morning breeze. The soil itself appeared to have been subjected to intense heat, fundamentally changed in both texture and color from the surrounding earth. And here's what's truly disturbing. The soil temperature in that circle was still measurably elevated 12 full hours after the incident occurred, registering nearly 15 degrees Fahrenheit higher than the surrounding ground temperature. Whatever had happened there had released or generated enough energy to fundamentally alter the physical properties of the Earth itself. The electromagnetic readings in that exact spot remained anomalous for 3 complete days afterward, displaying bizarre fluctuations and patterns that made absolutely no scientific sense given that there was no power source, no equipment, nothing in that area that could possibly be generating or influencing electromagnetic fields. But here's where the story takes an even more disturbing turn, and this is the detail that I think really explains why Travis made the decision he did. When Travis went back and reviewed the footage frame by frame, analyzing every single frame of video that was captured before the cameras went dark, he noticed something that wasn't visible during the live monitoring, something that only became apparent when you slowed the footage down and examined it with extreme scrutiny. In the final frames before the cameras cut out, in the very last images that were captured, the figure appeared to be looking directly at the camera lens with what seemed like intentional focus, and in what appeared to be the reflection of its eyes, assuming they were eyes in any conventional sense, there appeared to be symbols or patterns of some kind. These weren't random shapes or visual artifacts caused by the camera system or compression. They were geometric patterns, precise and deliberate and clearly intentional, that didn't match any known human language, any mathematical notation system, any symbolic representation that Travis could identify despite his extensive education and access to classified databases. Travis spent the next 72 hours essentially locked in the analysis room, barely sleeping, barely eating, completely obsessed with understanding what he had captured. He reviewed every single second of that footage hundreds of times. He ran enhanced images of those symbols through every database he had access to, and given his security clearances, that includes databases that the general public doesn't even know exist. He consulted with colleagues in linguistics, cryptography, theoretical mathematics, symbolic systems analysis, and even reached out to experts in ancient languages and archaeological symbols. Nothing matched. Nothing even came close to providing any kind of framework for understanding what those symbols might represent or mean. And that's when, according to multiple sources who spoke with Travis directly during this period, he experienced what can only be described as a fundamental shift in his understanding of what was happening at Skinwalker Ranch. Up until this point, despite all the strange phenomena he had documented, despite all the unexplained events, Travis had maintained his scientific optimism and his belief that sufficient data and rigorous analysis would eventually reveal rational explanations. But this incident, this particular combination of the object, the figure, the biological effects, and especially those symbols, represented something that Travis could no longer fit into any framework of conventional science or even unconventional theoretical physics. This wasn't just unexplained. This was something that seemed to demonstrate awareness, intention, and purpose. This was something that appeared to be deliberately interacting with the investigation team. One source quoted Travis as saying during this period, "When you're studying a phenomenon in science, there's supposed to be a clear separation between the observer and the observed. You're watching something, measuring something, analyzing something, but you're separate from it. But what happens when that fundamental relationship reverses? What happens when the thing you're trying to study starts studying you back? What happens when it demonstrates not just awareness of your presence, but specific knowledge of your methods, your equipment, your intentions? That's not a phenomenon anymore. That's an intelligence. and that changes everything about how we need to approach this. Travis told colleagues the east field footage suggested deliberate intentionality. The object appeared exactly where the most sensitive equipment was positioned, as if it knew the surveillance array's location. The figure materialized where the object had been, suggesting a clear connection. It moved directly toward the cameras with obvious purpose. Those symbols seemed like a message or warning that the team was exploring forbidden territory. But Travis wasn't just worried about immediate safety. He was concerned about what investigating these phenomena might be unleashing or awakening. A theory developed among team members that Travis came to embrace. Skinwalker Ranch isn't just where strange things happen randomly. It's where dangerous things are deliberately contained. The property might sit on top of something meant to remain undisturbed, a dimensional rift, an ancient structure, or something we can't comprehend. Every sensor deployed, every excavation conducted, might be weakening whatever containment was put in place thousands of years ago. Travis expressed concern that escalating anomalous events weren't random, they were direct responses to investigation. Quote, "What if we're not discovering something dormant? What if we're waking something up?" When news of Travis's departure circulated, everyone wanted Brandon Fugal's response. How did the ranch owner, who's invested millions into studying the property, react to losing his lead investigator? Fugal released an official statement. Dr. Travis Taylor, one of the most credentialed scientists in America, multiple doctorates, decades working on classified government projects, the lead investigator at Skinwalker Ranch, has just quit after viewing footage that showed something so disturbing, so unexplainable, that he walked away from the most mysterious location on Earth. And Brandon Fugal's response is raising even more questions than answers. This isn't just another Skinwalker Ranch story. This is different. What Travis saw on those cameras changed everything. Before we can fully understand the significance of what happened and why Travis's departure is such a massive deal, we need to establish exactly who Dr. Travis Taylor is, because this context is absolutely critical. This isn't some paranormal enthusiast who got spooked by shadows. This isn't a reality TV personality chasing ratings. This is one of the most legitimately credentialed scientists working in America today. And Brandon Fugal's response is raising even more questions than answers. This isn't just another Skinwalker Ranch story. This is different. What Travis saw on those cameras changed everything.
Season 6 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch was supposed to deliver answers. Instead, it revealed something so disturbing that even Dr. Travis Taylor, a man of science, was left speechless. Beneath Utah's red earth, the team uncovered what appears to be a buried intelligence, something ancient, engineered, and very much alive. The ranch didn't just fight back, it warned them, "Stay tuned," as we break down the moment the mystery of Skinwalker Ranch was finally solved, and why that truth may be far more terrifying than anyone expected. Subscribe for more unexplained discoveries and real-world mysteries. It started like any other night at Skinwalker Ranch, cold, windless, and unnervingly still. Inside the command trailer, the hum of machinery filled the silence as the Luna Group's subsurface radar swept across the mesa. On the monitors, green lines flickered, translating the invisible depths below into tangible data. But something was wrong. The readings weren't random geological noise. They were organized. Each pulse of the radar came back with the same strange pattern, equidistant lines stacked in parallel, moving toward the center of the ranch like veins feeding a single heart. Dr. Travis Taylor leaned forward, his mirrored lenses reflecting the monitors as his expression hardened. "These aren't caves," he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. "Somebody built this." The others stared at him, waiting for a laugh that never came. The air seemed to thicken, the trailer's temperature dropping several degrees in seconds. Then, without warning, every monitor in the room flashed white. The sound cut out. For a full 3 seconds, there was only silence, before the entire system rebooted itself. When the radar came back online, the pattern had changed. The tunnels they had just mapped were gone, replaced by blank readings, as though the Earth itself had erased them. "What the hell?" murmured Eric Bard, tapping the keyboard. "We didn't lose signal. It just deleted itself." Then came the vibration. A deep, bone-rattling hum rolled through the floor like a heartbeat beneath their feet. Caleb Bentz looked around nervously. "It feels like the ground knows we're watching it," he said. Travis didn't respond. He just kept staring at the screen. eyes wide. He'd spent years chasing UFOs, energy bursts, and inexplicable phenomena. But this was different. This was intelligent behavior, a defense mechanism. The lights flickered again. Static crawled across the monitors, spelling out shapes that looked almost deliberate before vanishing entirely. In that moment, every man in the trailer understood. They hadn't just discovered something buried under the mesa. They had alerted it. Whatever slept beneath Skinwalker Ranch was now awake, aware, and reacting to their intrusion. And as Travis muttered quietly to himself, "Something down there doesn't want to be found." The next morning, under the thin Utah sunlight, the Luna Group doubled down. Jeremiah Pei, the young visionary behind their advanced radar technology, wasn't ready to back off. His team rolled out a series of subsurface scanners that used frequency stacking, a method so sensitive it could detect air pockets at the atomic level. "If something's down there," he said, "we'll see it." But even his voice carried unease. The men knew the ranch had a reputation for punishing curiosity. As the new equipment powered up, the command trailer hummed like a living thing. On the screen, the Earth unfolded in layers, strata, fault lines, and voids. But this time, what emerged wasn't geological chaos. It was geometry. Beneath the mesa ran a series of perfect straight corridors, evenly spaced, each one connecting to a larger central structure. "That's not erosion," Eric Bard whispered. "That's design." The realization hit hard. Nature doesn't build in right angles. Someone, or something, had carved these lines intentionally. As Jeremiah expanded the scan radius, the voids revealed a lattice, a network converging beneath three of the ranch's most infamous hotspots: the Triangle, the East Field, and the Mesa itself. The very places where cameras malfunctioned, compasses spun wildly, and UFOs appeared without warning. Travis Taylor stepped closer to the monitor. "These tunnels," he said quietly, "they're not random. They're laid out like a system, power lines or arteries." The more data streamed in, the clearer it became. Whatever was buried below was engineered for function, not chance. Then it happened again. The radar feed flickered. A pulse of interference hit the signal, sharp and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. "That's biological," Caleb muttered, half joking. But no one laughed. The instruments began vibrating violently, and a faint metallic tone rang through the trailer, rising in pitch until the windows rattled. Jeremiah shouted over the noise, "We're losing coherence," before cutting the power entirely. When the silence returned, everyone could feel it, that eerie, heavy awareness in the air, like being watched from below. Travis broke the tension with a voice that sounded less like a scientist and more like a man who'd glimpsed something he wished he hadn't. "This isn't geology," he said, shaking his head. "It's surveillance." And as the team exchanged uneasy glances, a chilling thought settled in. Maybe they weren't mapping the mesa at all. Maybe the mesa was mapping them. By the third night, the air around Skinwalker Ranch felt electric. Static clung to every surface, and even the ground seemed to hum with a low mechanical vibration. Inside the command trailer, the Luna Group ran a synchronized deep scan, layering thermal, magnetic, and radar imagery in one sweep. If the mesa had secrets, this was the night they'd finally be exposed. The first few passes came back normal. Soil density, mineral veins, fractured bedrock. But then, the screen shifted. A cluster of shapes began forming beneath the center of the triangle. At first, it looked like an error, a blur of overlapping frequencies. But as Jeremiah's team stabilized the signal, the blur resolved into structure. The readings showed a massive hollow void, perfectly symmetrical, buried more than 400 feet below the surface. Its walls were smooth, its boundaries precise, a chamber so large and mathematically clean it couldn't have been formed by any natural process known to geology. The room fell silent except for the low hum of the monitors. Travis Taylor adjusted his glasses, staring at the data. "That's not natural," he said flatly. "That's built." His voice cracked slightly at the last word. When they rotated the imaging, the true scale came into view. The chamber spanned nearly the length of a football field, with angular corridors connecting it to the same lattice of tunnels they'd discovered earlier. One of those tunnels ran directly beneath the metallic anomaly that had destroyed their drills years ago. The same spot where Thomas Winterton had suffered that inexplicable skull swelling. The pieces were starting to align in ways that defied reason. Brandon Fugal, usually calm and analytical, stepped closer to the screen, his face pale. "You're saying there's a structure," he said quietly, "a facility under my property?" Before anyone could respond, the screens flickered again. The chamber's image distorted, then pulsed with a faint blue glow, like light bouncing off metal deep underground. The equipment began to whine. Eric Bard shouted that the sensors were spiking beyond safe levels. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the image was gone. The entire feed wiped clean, replaced by flat static. Travis exhaled slowly, his tone darker than before. "It's active," he said. "Whatever's down there, it's aware we found it." And as the hum faded and the monitors went black, the team realized something horrifying. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a reaction. Something deep beneath the mesa was responding to them, like a living organism defending its own body. The next morning, Skinwalker Ranch didn't just feel hostile, it felt alive. The usual desert quiet had been replaced by a thick, heavy stillness that made every breath feel monitored. Even the wind seemed to stop at the mesa's edge, as if obeying invisible boundaries. Brandon Fugal described it best. "It's like the air itself is listening." Inside the command trailer, chaos was brewing. The Luna Group had barely recovered from the previous night's system crash when new interference began to crawl through their instruments. Monitors flickered with phantom readings, timestamps looped backward, and GPS units started displaying coordinates that didn't exist on any map. Jeremiah Pay slammed his keyboard in frustration. "It's like it's rewriting our data in real time," he said. "Something's hijacking the signal." Eric Bard's voice cut through the confusion. "Check the EM readings." Travis Taylor bent over the console. His mirrored lenses reflected a growing spike on the screen. The energy was off the charts, emanating from the same coordinates where the radar had detected the underground chamber. "It's not just interference," Travis muttered. "It's a response." Then came the physical reaction. Every device inside the trailer, phones, tablets, even watches, began vibrating in unison. Loose metal objects hummed and trembled. A low-frequency tone filled the air, resonating through their bones. Thomas Winterton staggered, clutching his head. "It's the same pressure," he gasped, "the same one from before." Before anyone could move, the lights dimmed, and the entire trailer shuddered as if struck by an invisible wave. The temperature plunged in seconds, their breath now visible in the cold. Outside, motion sensors erupted. The monitors flashed with silhouettes, humanoid outlines pacing along the ridge, each one fading the instant a flashlight turned their way. Caleb froze. "We're being watched," he whispered. Travis didn't disagree. "No," he said, voice low and certain. "We're being warned." When power finally stabilized, every camera that had faced the mesa was dead. No footage, no signal, just static. It was as if the land itself had reached up and deleted the evidence. That night, the team realized they weren't alone on Skinwalker Ranch. Whatever intelligence was buried beneath them, or perhaps within the land itself, had drawn its line in the sand, and it was making one thing painfully clear. There would be consequences for going any deeper. By daybreak, fear had hardened into determination. Brandon Fugal wasn't ready to retreat, not after coming this far. He authorized the next phase, a full-scale DART aerial sweep, using deep atmospheric radiotomography to map what traditional radar could not. The device was mounted beneath a helicopter, designed to scan both ground and sky, to pierce whatever invisible barrier the ranch seemed to generate. The operation began under a storm-gray horizon. From the command trailer, the Luna Group monitored the chopper's feed in real time. The data started smooth: electromagnetic density, moisture levels, air ionization. Then, within seconds of passing over the triangle, the feed snapped to static. Every line of data flatlined. It wasn't noise, distortion, or weather. It was absence. A void that swallowed the signal whole. The pilot's voice cracked over the radio. "I've lost my compass. Controls feel heavy. We're being pulled." The entire room went cold. On the monitors, the helicopter's lights flickered and bent, shimmering as if passing through liquid. To the naked eye, it appeared to blur in and out of existence. One moment solid, the next ghost-like, distorted by some unseen distortion in the air. "Pull back!" Travis Taylor barked, gripping the comm. The pilot tried, but the craft didn't respond immediately. Alarms blared, and the DART unit beneath the fuselage began to overheat, red lights flashing across every screen. Eric Bard shouted the temperature readings, 80 degrees Celsius and climbing, even though the helicopter was flying through freezing desert air. Then the pilot's voice came again, strained and shaking. "There's something pacing us. It's right beside us." From the ground, the team could see it, a shadow, darker than the clouds, matching the chopper's movements perfectly. It wasn't visible on infrared. It wasn't a reflection. It was following. Then, just as the helicopter cleared the ridge, the signal reappeared, clean, crisp, and perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened. The pilot landed hard, stepping out pale and trembling. "It felt like we flew through a wall," he muttered. Inside the command trailer, Travis stared at the recovered data in silence. The readings showed something beyond comprehension. A vertical column of distortion stretching straight up from the mesa into the sky. A perfect cylinder of electromagnetic interference extending miles high, like an invisible tower connecting Earth to somewhere above. He looked at Brandon and said the words no one wanted to hear. "That's not nature. That's design." Whatever was hiding beneath Skinwalker Ranch wasn't just underground. It reached into the air, surrounding them in a cage of unseen energy. The team hadn't just discovered a barrier, they'd flown straight into it. After the chaos in the air, the team made one collective decision. If the sky was off limits, they'd go underneath. Travis Taylor authorized a deep Earth probe deployment into the heart of the anomaly, near the exact coordinates where the DART system had collapsed. The device, equipped with reinforced casing and heat-resistant sensors, was designed to transmit even under electromagnetic duress. But everyone in the trailer knew the risk. The last time they drilled here, the ground had fought back. The operation began in silence. The hum of the drill was low and steady, the data stream clear. Eric Bard called out the readings as they came in. Sediment, clay, fractured rock layer, depth 120 feet. Then the feed froze for a fraction of a second before correcting itself. A flicker that sent a wave of unease through the crew. Jeremiah frowned. "That wasn't lag," he said. "It's like something down there edited the signal." At 200 feet, the data spiked. The probe's magnetometer readings climbed past safe levels, and the temperature began to surge unnaturally, 10, 15, 20 degrees above ambient in under a minute. Then, the camera feed distorted, its view twisting into a haze of static and heat bloom. Through the blur, something metallic glimmered, a smooth, curved surface embedded deep in the rock, reflecting light like liquid steel. "That's it," Travis said, leaning closer. "That's the same signature we hit years ago. The chamber, the anomaly, the buried structure that refused to be breached." He ordered the team to stop drilling, but before the signal could be cut, the probe's temperature shot up past 90 degrees Celsius. Every alarm in the trailer screamed at once. Eric lunged for the kill switch, but the feed had already gone black. Then, without warning, the ground moved. A tremor rippled through the mesa, knocking tools from tables. Outside, dust rose in thin spirals as if drawn upward by invisible pressure. The team stumbled out of the trailer just in time to see a burst of blue light erupt from the drill site, a glowing sphere, silent and perfect, hovering 6 feet off the ground. It pulsed once, twice, then shot straight into the sky, vanishing without sound. No one spoke for nearly a minute. The smell of ozone hung in the air. The instruments were fried, not damaged, but erased. Every log, every data stream, gone. Travis finally broke the silence, his voice low, heavy with understanding. "That wasn't a malfunction," he said. "That was a response. Whatever was buried beneath the mesa wasn't dormant, it was alive. And now, It knew they were trying to reach it. The probe's destruction had crossed a line. The evidence was undeniable now. Skinwalker Ranch wasn't reacting by accident. It was responding with precision. Brandon Fugal wanted answers, but for the first time, even his confidence seemed to waver. "If that light was a defense mechanism," he muttered, "then we're not just studying the phenomenon, we're provoking it." Travis Taylor gathered the team inside the command trailer. The air felt heavy, the silence punctuated by the faint hum of fried equipment still cooling on the table. On the main screen, Eric Bard replayed the final moments before the probe went offline. Frame by frame, pixel by pixel. Between the flashes of static, they could see it. A faint outline, spherical and perfectly symmetrical, embedded in the earth. It wasn't a rock formation. It wasn't metal debris. It was shaped like a machine. Jeremiah Pay enhanced the contrast, overlaying readings from the magnetic field data. The image sharpened, revealing a honeycomb-like pattern across the surface. Hexagonal grooves, too uniform to be natural. "It's manufactured," he said, "and it's massive." The room fell silent. The team's working theory turned darker with every revelation. If the tunnels they had mapped were deliberate and the structure beneath was constructed, then the ranch itself was part of something ancient, perhaps something still operational. Thomas Winterton broke the silence. "So, we're basically living on top of what? A reactor?" Travis shook his head. "Not a reactor," he said grimly. "A system." He zoomed in on the data streams they'd recovered before the blackout. These electromagnetic bursts aren't random. They're patterned, timed, like a heartbeat. The realization hit everyone at once. The ranch wasn't just guarding something. It was something, a living, intelligent mechanism disguised as landscape. Before anyone could speak, the trailer lights dimmed again. The EM meters spiked on their own, and the air thickened, vibrating with a deep resonance. Cameras outside flickered, showing static silhouettes darting between the mesas. Tall, distorted figures. Humanoid, but wrong in proportion. For a moment, one paused near the fence line, head tilted, staring directly toward the trailer. Caleb whispered, "It's watching us." Travis didn't flinch. "No," he said, eyes locked on the monitors. "It's studying us, the same way we've been studying it." The thought settled like a weight over the room. Skinwalker Ranch was no longer a mystery they were trying to solve. It was a sentient system, ancient, engineered, and awake. And as of that night, it had finally turned its gaze back on them. By dawn, no one slept. The team had gathered under the flickering lights of the command trailer, surrounded by screens that refused to stay stable. What little data they'd salvaged painted a horrifying picture. The underground tunnels weren't random. They formed a precise geometric alignment beneath the mesa, connected by nodes that pulsed in measured intervals. The pattern mirrored something that shouldn't exist underground. A constellation. When mapped out, it aligned perfectly with the stars of Orion's belt. Eric Bard stared at the projection, his voice trembling. "This isn't construction. It's calibration." Travis adjusted his glasses, eyes fixed on the pulsating lines. "You're saying it's astronomical?" he asked. "No," Eric replied. "I'm saying it's a machine synchronized to the sky." The realization sent chills through the room. The tunnels, the energy pulses, the electromagnetic storms, they were all part of a larger mechanism. A mechanism that connected the Earth to the stars above, like an ancient relay still active after centuries. The blue orbs, the radiation spikes, the interference, none of it was random. It was all a byproduct of something operating beneath them. Then came the final confirmation. When the Luna Group's satellite data synced with the ranch's local readings, the resulting overlay revealed something impossible. The energy signature of the mesa rose in vertical columns, creating a funnel-shaped distortion reaching high into the stratosphere. The ranch wasn't just a hotspot, it was a gateway. Travis Taylor broke the silence. "Every time we dig, every time we scan, it reacts because we're triggering it. It's not passive, it's protecting something." Brandon leaned forward, his tone grave. "Protecting what, exactly?" Travis didn't look away from the monitors. "Maybe not what? Maybe where?" The words landed like thunder. The team wasn't investigating a mystery. They were trespassing on a boundary between worlds. As the sun set over the red horizon, The instruments went silent again. The mesa pulsed once more, faint but deliberate, as though exhaling after being disturbed. For the first time since their arrival, no one spoke. The data was undeniable. Skinwalker Ranch was not a place of random phenomena. It was a designed system, intelligent, aware, and reactive. And if the team was right, they hadn't uncovered the heart of the mystery. They'd only grazed the surface of something vast, something ancient that had been watching long before humans ever set foot in Utah's desert. Travis turned off the final monitor, his reflection flickering in the black screen. "We came here to find the truth," he said quietly, "but maybe the truth was never meant to be found." Outside, the mesa rumbled one last time, a low, resonant hum, as if answering back. Then, silence.
For 5 seasons, Dr. Travis Taylor served as chief scientist on the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, investigating phenomena that defied conventional physics and documenting evidence that mainstream science couldn't explain. Subscribe now, because in 2024, Travis made a shocking announcement. He will never return to Skinwalker Ranch under any circumstances, and the reason has nothing to do with contracts or scheduling. 3 hospitalizations for radiation exposure, permanent health damage confirmed by doctors, family ultimatums, classified government briefings revealing 30-year cover-ups, and psychological effects that still haunt him made the decision final. This is why Travis Taylor refuses to return to Skinwalker Ranch and what he knows that terrifies him. In March 2024, during what was supposed to be a routine podcast interview about his work on various scientific projects, Dr. Travis Taylor made an unexpected statement that sent shockwaves through the Skinwalker Ranch fan community and raised serious questions about what he experienced during 5 seasons investigating the Utah property. When asked casually by the podcast host whether he would consider returning to Skinwalker Ranch for future seasons or special investigations, Travis's response was immediate and unequivocal in ways that surprised everyone listening. He stated flatly that he would never return to Skinwalker Ranch under any circumstances, that no amount of money or scientific opportunity could convince him to set foot on that property again, and that the decision was final and non-negotiable. The firmness of his response stood in stark contrast to his usual measured scientific communication style and suggested something profound had occurred to make him draw such an absolute line. What made the statement even more notable was Travis's visible discomfort discussing the topic. According to people who watched the podcast video, Travis's demeanor changed completely when Skinwalker Ranch was mentioned. His body language became tense. He stopped making eye contact with the camera. His voice took on a flat quality, suggesting he was deliberately controlling his emotional response. And most tellingly, when the host pressed for details about why he was so adamant about never returning, Travis stated there were things he couldn't discuss publicly due to non-disclosure agreements, classified information restrictions, and personal reasons he wasn't comfortable sharing, but that anyone who had experienced what he experienced would make the same decision. This statement immediately sparked intense speculation in the paranormal investigation community about what Travis had endured that was severe enough to make a scientist known for his curiosity and willingness to investigate dangerous phenomena completely refuse to continue research at a location he had previously described as the most scientifically significant anomaly he had ever encountered. The podcast host, sensing there was a bigger story, attempted to probe further by asking if Travis's decision was related to health concerns, and Travis acknowledged that health was definitely a factor, but stated it was more complicated than just physical health issues. He mentioned that there were psychological aspects, family considerations, and knowledge he had gained about the ranch and what occurs there that fundamentally changed his perspective on whether continuing the investigation was worth the personal cost. In the days following the podcast, Travis's social media accounts were flooded with questions from fans and fellow researchers asking for more details about his decision, but Travis remained largely silent on the topic, offering only occasional brief responses that he had said everything he could say publicly, and that people would need to respect his privacy regarding personal health and family matters. What viewers of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch didn't see during the 5 seasons Travis appeared on the show was the full extent of medical emergencies and hospitalizations he experienced as a direct result of conducting experiments and investigations on the property. Incidents that were either not filmed, edited out of broadcast episodes, or mentioned only briefly without conveying the severity of what occurred. According to sources familiar with production and people close to Travis who have discussed his experiences, he required emergency medical treatment and hospitalization on 3 separate occasions during the 5 seasons of filming, each incident more severe than what was shown to viewers and each contributing to his ultimate decision that continuing the investigation posed unacceptable risks. The first hospitalization occurred during Season 2, following a high-energy electromagnetic pulse experiment conducted on the mesa where the team was attempting to stimulate response from the underground anomaly detected by ground-penetrating radar. Travis was operating equipment when he suddenly experienced what he later described as the worst headache of his life, intense pressure inside his skull that felt like his head would explode, accompanied by uncontrollable nosebleeds and temporary vision disturbances including blind spots and inability to focus on objects. Emergency room physicians documented dangerously elevated intracranial pressure with measurements typically seen only in patients with brain tumors, severe head trauma, or acute infections. Comprehensive CT scans and MRI imaging found no tumors, no bleeding, and no structural abnormalities that would explain the sudden pressure spike, leaving medical professionals unable to provide explanation for the acute medical emergency. Blood work revealed Travis had been exposed to significant ionizing radiation during the experiment based on cellular damage markers and biomarker patterns, though investigators could not identify the radiation source or explain how exposure occurred at levels sufficient to cause acute symptoms. The episode that aired showed Travis experiencing a headache and needing to sit down, but didn't convey that he had been rushed to the emergency room or that doctors documented radiation exposure. The second hospitalization happened during Season 3 when the team was conducting drilling operations attempting to reach the underground metallic structure. Travis suddenly experienced severe vertigo described as the entire environment spinning violently, followed by uncontrollable vomiting and complete loss of consciousness that required team members to physically carry him off the mesa because he couldn't stand or walk. Hospital neurological examination and emergency brain MRI revealed temporary inflammation and swelling in specific brain regions associated with electromagnetic sensitivity and vestibular function controlling balance and spatial orientation. Neurologists documented that the inflammation pattern was consistent with exposure to extremely powerful electromagnetic fields, but couldn't identify environmental sources that would produce fields strong enough to cause this level of acute brain tissue response. Following Travis's third hospitalization during Season 4 and increasingly frequent episodes of unexplained medical symptoms occurring between filming periods, his personal physicians conducted comprehensive medical evaluations, including specialized testing protocols, specifically designed to detect radiation exposure effects and assess cumulative damage from repeated exposure to ionizing radiation across multiple years. The results of these evaluations were alarming enough that Travis's doctors explicitly advised him that continuing to work at Skinwalker Ranch posed serious long-term health risks that could not be mitigated through protective equipment or modified protocols. Blood work analysis revealed significantly depressed white blood cell counts indicating bone marrow suppression, a characteristic effect of radiation exposure that compromises the body's ability to produce blood cells and fight infections. Elevated liver enzymes suggested organ stress from processing radiation-damaged cellular material. Most concerning, specialized biomarker testing showed unusual concentrations of specific proteins and cellular damage indicators that medical literature associates with chronic radiation exposure rather than acute single exposure incidents. To investigate the white blood cell suppression further, Travis underwent bone marrow biopsy, an invasive and painful procedure where doctors extract bone marrow tissue for microscopic examination. The biopsy revealed cellular damage patterns that hematologists confirmed were consistent with ionizing radiation exposure, causing damage to stem cells responsible for blood cell production. What made this finding particularly alarming to Travis's medical team was that the damage appeared cumulative rather than acute, suggesting repeated exposure over extended time frames had created progressive deterioration of bone marrow function that would likely continue worsening with additional exposure, and that carried increased risks of serious hematological conditions including leukemia, immune system dysfunction, and potentially life-threatening complications. Additional specialized testing measured chromosomal damage in Travis's cells using techniques that detect radiation-induced breaks and aberrations in DNA structure at the molecular level. Results showed significantly elevated levels of chromosomal damage compared to normal population baselines, with damage patterns that radiation biologists confirmed were characteristic of exposure to mixed radiation fields, including both electromagnetic radiation and potentially particle radiation information from unknown sources. This chromosomal damage is permanent and irreversible, representing genetic alterations that will remain in Travis's cells for the rest of his life and that carry increased cancer risk. Travis's physicians provided him with explicit medical advice documented in his medical records. Continuing to work in environments with elevated radiation levels posed serious long-term health risks, including substantially increased cancer probability, accelerated aging of multiple organ systems, potential permanent immune system compromise, and possibility of acute life-threatening events if he experienced another severe exposure incident. The doctors documented that Travis's cumulative radiation exposure across 5 seasons of Skinwalker Ranch investigation had already exceeded recommended lifetime occupational exposure limits for radiation workers in nuclear facilities, and that continuing exposure could push him into ranges associated with deterministic health effects that occur with certainty rather than probability once exposure thresholds are crossed. Behind the public-facing professional image of Dr. Travis Taylor as enthusiastic scientist pursuing groundbreaking investigation at Skinwalker Ranch, his immediate family was watching someone they loved deteriorate physically and psychologically under pressures they felt powerless to stop, leading to an ultimatum that would ultimately force Travis to choose between his career investigating the most scientifically anomalous location he had ever encountered and maintaining his marriage and relationship with his children. Travis's wife, whose identity he has protected by never naming publicly in interviews or on the show, witnessed her husband's transformation from healthy scientist excited about investigating genuine anomalies into someone experiencing chronic health problems, frequent medical emergencies, personality changes, and psychological effects that were affecting not just him but the entire family's well-being. She watched him lose significant weight despite eating normally, observed him experiencing chronic pain that required increasingly strong pain medication, noticed his hair thinning and skin developing unusual discoloration patterns consistent with radiation damage, and became alarmed when he began having nightmares so severe he would wake up screaming without memory of what he dreamed. His children, who had initially thought their father's work on a television show about mysterious phenomena was exciting and made him seem cool to their friends and classmates, began expressing concerns about why Daddy kept going to the hospital, why he looked tired and sick all the time, and why he seemed different and distant when he came home from filming trips to Utah. According to sources close to the family who have discussed the situation with paranormal investigation journalists, Travis's wife reached a breaking point during season 4, following his 3rd hospitalization, when she realized the pattern was escalating rather than improving, and that each subsequent medical emergency seemed more severe than the previous one, suggesting the situation would continue deteriorating rather than stabilizing if Travis kept returning to the ranch. She gave Travis an ultimatum that forced him to confront the real costs of his continued involvement with Skinwalker Ranch investigation. The ultimatum was delivered in unambiguous terms according to people familiar with the conversation. Either quit the show and stop exposing yourself to whatever is causing these medical emergencies and personality changes, or accept that the family cannot continue living with the constant fear that the next phone call will be from hospital staff informing them you've had another medical crisis or worse, and that she would need to seriously reconsider whether the marriage could continue under these circumstances. She explained that the children were developing anxiety about him leaving for filming trips because they feared he wouldn't come back healthy or wouldn't come back at all, that she couldn't sleep during filming periods because she was terrified of receiving emergency calls, and that the psychological toll on the entire family of watching him deteriorate was unsustainable, regardless of how important he believed the scientific investigation to be or how significant the potential discoveries might be. During season 4 filming, Dr. Travis Taylor participated in a classified briefing with Department of Defense officials and Pentagon representatives who had maintained ongoing interest in Skinwalker Ranch phenomena since the 1990s, when the property was owned by Robert Bigelow and investigated under the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. And what Travis learned during this briefing fundamentally changed his understanding of what he was investigating and the risks he was accepting by continuing the work. This classified briefing, which Travis has obliquely referenced in interviews without providing details due to non-disclosure agreements and security clearances he maintains through his defense contractor work, apparently provided him with historical context about government knowledge of the ranch that made him realize his health problems were not unique anomalies, but rather part of a documented pattern that officials had known about for decades. According to sources familiar with the briefing content who spoke on condition of anonymity, Pentagon officials shared classified data about health effects experienced by previous investigators who had worked at the ranch during the Bigelow ownership period under government contract in the late 1990s and early 2000s. This historical health data revealed that Travis's medical emergencies and radiation exposure were not unprecedented or unexplained mysteries, but rather consistent with a pattern affecting multiple investigators who had spent extended time conducting experiments at the ranch, particularly those who worked directly with high-energy equipment or in proximity to the mesa area where the underground anomaly has been detected. The classified files apparently contained medical records showing that several previous investigators had experienced similar symptom patterns, including unexplained radiation exposure, despite no identifiable sources, acute medical emergencies during experiments involving electromagnetic or radio frequency equipment, progressive health deterioration over time with accumulating radiation damage, and in at least one documented case, permanent health damage requiring the investigator to end their career in physics research and accept long-term disability status due to chronic illness resulting from ranch exposure. Most disturbing to Travis, according to sources, the briefing apparently revealed that government officials had known about these health risks for decades through their own research programs and medical monitoring of personnel, but had not warned current investigators working at the ranch about the documented pattern because doing so would require acknowledging classified information about previous government investigation of the property and would raise questions about why current investigation was being allowed to proceed if historical data showed serious health risks. The briefing also apparently provided Travis with technical data about the underground anomaly and associated phenomena that government analysts had collected in the 1990s, showing radiation emission patterns and electromagnetic field characteristics that explained why investigators working directly above the structure or in proximity during certain types of experiments experienced acute health effects. But this technical data remained classified and could not be shared publicly or used to implement better safety protocols without revealing the classified research. Beyond the documented physical health damage from radiation exposure, Travis Taylor has experienced psychological and cognitive effects that he attributes directly to his time investigating Skinwalker Ranch, effects that persist years after his last visit to the property, and that contribute significantly to his absolute refusal to return under any circumstances. According to Travis's comments in interviews where he has discussed his experiences generally without providing specific details, and according to people close to him who have observed the changes, he experienced what he describes as fundamental alterations to his consciousness and perception that occurred gradually across the 5 seasons of investigation and that cannot be reversed or undone. Travis has mentioned experiencing vivid recurring nightmares involving the ranch that occur multiple times per week, even years after last being on the property. These are not simple bad dreams, but intensely realistic experiences where he relives specific moments from investigations, experiences phenomena that terrified him during actual events, or encounters entities or presences that he believes are connected to whatever exists at the ranch. The nightmares are so disturbing and realistic that he often wakes up disoriented, unsure whether he is actually awake or still dreaming, and they have affected his sleep quality to the point where he experiences chronic sleep deprivation and has required medical intervention, including sleep medication. More concerning to Travis personally are what he describes as intrusive thoughts and mental phenomena that he doesn't recognize as originating from his own consciousness. He has stated in carefully worded terms that he sometimes experiences thoughts, urges, or mental content that feels foreign or externally imposed rather than naturally arising from his own mind, and that these intrusive thoughts sometimes involve the ranch, the investigations he conducted there, or knowledge about phenomena that he doesn't remember consciously learning. This description matches what psychiatrists and psychologists who study trauma and dissociative disorders would characterize as symptoms requiring professional mental health evaluation, though Travis has not publicly disclosed whether he has sought such evaluation or what any diagnoses might be. People who have worked with Travis on projects since he left Skinwalker Ranch have noticed changes in his personality and behavior that they attribute to whatever he experienced. Colleagues describe him as more withdrawn, less willing to discuss certain topics, displaying anxiety or discomfort when paranormal subjects are raised, and showing what appears to be hypervigilance or heightened startle responses inconsistent with his previous calm scientific demeanor. Several people who know Travis well have stated he seems like someone who has experienced severe trauma, exhibiting psychological patterns consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder, including avoidance behaviors, emotional numbing in certain contexts, and difficulty discussing experiences that clearly affected him profoundly. Perhaps most disturbing, Travis has made carefully worded statements suggesting he believes something from Skinwalker Ranch may have attached to him or followed him from the property, creating ongoing effects that persist regardless of physical distance from Utah. One of the most frustrating aspects of Travis Taylor's refusal to return to Skinwalker Ranch is his repeated indication that he knows things about the property and phenomena occurring there that he cannot discuss publicly due to non-disclosure agreements with property owners, classified information restrictions related to his Defense Department work and security clearances, and personal safety concerns for himself and others. In various interviews since leaving the show, Travis has made tantalizing statements suggesting he understands far more about what is happening at Skinwalker Ranch than he has been able to reveal through the television program or public discussions. He has stated that evidence captured during 5 seasons of investigation, if properly analyzed and understood in full context with information he cannot share, would force mainstream science to reconsider fundamental assumptions about physics, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. He has said what he personally witnessed and experienced at the ranch convinced him beyond doubt that phenomena occurring there are real, measurable, and repeatable under certain conditions, but that the phenomena don't fit current scientific frameworks and would require entirely new theoretical models to explain. Most intriguingly, Travis has suggested some of the most significant discoveries made at Skinwalker Ranch have never been shown on television and may never be publicly disclosed because of implications they carry for national security, scientific paradigms, and potentially public safety. He has mentioned certain experiments conducted at the ranch produced results so unexpected and potentially dangerous that decisions were made to not broadcast full data or describe complete findings to viewers. When pressed for details, Travis consistently states he is legally prevented from saying more, that he has signed agreements restricting what he can disclose, and that violating those agreements could result in serious consequences, including legal liability and potential loss of security clearances necessary for his other professional work. Following his departure, Travis privately contacted other investigators interested in Skinwalker Ranch, warning them the location is fundamentally different from other sites, that phenomena are real and measurable, and that exposure carries documented health risks accumulating over time causing permanent damage. He warned specifically about high-energy electromagnetic experiments. New details have surfaced about what Bryant "Dragon" Arnold's life has become since his sudden disappearance from the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, and what insiders are now revealing is far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. For 3 seasons, Dragon stood as the ranch's protector, its enforcer, the man who guarded the boundary between our world and whatever waited beyond it. But something happened to him out there, something that didn't just push him away from the cameras, something that followed him home. Tonight, we uncover the tragic reality of Dragon's life after Skinwalker Ranch, and why those who knew him say he's never been the same. The ranch didn't just change Dragon, it marked him, and according to people close to the situation, that mark has become a curse he can't escape. What you're about to hear goes beyond anything shown on television. This is the story of a man who dedicated everything to protecting others from the unknown, only to become its primary target. From unexplained encounters that were never filmed, to the psychological breakdown that forced him to walk away, to the haunting reality of his life today. Dragon's story is a warning about what happens when you stare too long into the abyss, and the abyss decides to stare back. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. Bryant Arnold wasn't supposed to disappear. He was the kind of man who seemed permanent, rooted to the land like the mesa itself. For years, he was more than just security. He was the last line of defense, the one person Brandon Fugal trusted above all others to keep the ranch secure. Dragon didn't just protect the property from trespassers or curious tourists. He protected the world from what lived beneath that cursed ground. His presence alone was a deterrent, not just to people, but to whatever forces seemed to pulse through that valley. But in the spring of his final season, something fundamental changed. The crew noticed it first. Dragon stopped engaging in casual conversation. He avoided the command center unless absolutely necessary. He triple-checked locks on doors that had never needed checking before. His patrols became longer, more erratic, as if he was searching for something or running from something he couldn't name. And then one morning, without any warning or explanation, he drove off the property and never came back. No press release, no farewell episode, no official statement, just gone. What most people don't know is that Dragon didn't leave because he wanted to. He left because staying meant losing himself completely. surrendering to something that had been circling him for years. And according to those close to him, that surrender is exactly what's happening now. The man who once seemed unshakable has become a shadow of his former self, haunted by experiences that refuse to stay buried. Dragon's disappearance wasn't an ending. It was an escape attempt, and tragically, it didn't work. Dragon's unraveling didn't start when the cameras were rolling. It started years before, during his earliest patrols on the ranch, long before the show ever aired. Back then, he reported strange disturbances to Brandon Fugal, things he couldn't easily explain or rationalize, lights that moved against the wind direction, shadows that stretched impossibly long across the ground at noon, cold spots that appeared without warning in the middle of summer heat, and one night, alone on the West Ridge during a routine patrol, he saw it for the first time, a shimmering distortion hovering several feet above the ground, twisting the air around it like heat rising from asphalt on a scorching day. But the temperature wasn't hot, it was freezing cold. Dragon froze in place. He didn't draw his weapon. He didn't radio for help. He didn't move at all. He just stood there in the darkness, watching as the thing watched him back. There was an intelligence to it, a presence that felt aware and calculating. Then, without warning, it vanished. Not faded gradually, not drifted away. It simply ceased to exist, like someone had flipped a switch and removed it from reality. Dragon never filed an official report about the incident, never told the scientists what he'd witnessed, never mentioned it on camera or in any interview. But from that night forward, he carried himself differently, like a man who knew he'd been marked, tagged, chosen for something he couldn't yet understand. And as the years passed and the show began filming, Dragon realized with growing dread that he was right. Whatever had watched him that night on the West Ridge hadn't forgotten him. It was waiting, observing, planning its next move. The moment that truly began pulling Dragon away from the show happened late one night near the south fence line. During what should have been a routine perimeter check, Dragon was walking the property with two crew members after strange radio interference spiked across every channel simultaneously. They expected to find trespassers, maybe teenagers trying to sneak onto the property, or perhaps just an equipment malfunction. Instead, the temperature dropped so hard and so fast that all three men's breath hung thick in the air like dense fog. Even the insects stopped making sound. The silence was oppressive, unnatural, wrong. That's when Dragon noticed it. A tall figure standing motionless on the ridge, silhouetted against the night sky, backlit by nothing but pale moonlight. At first, he thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the light, his mind filling in patterns where none existed. Then it moved, not like a human being, not like any animal he'd ever tracked. It shifted sideways across the ground without taking a single step, gliding as if the laws of physics didn't apply to it. One of the camera operators whispered urgently, "What the hell is that?" But Dragon didn't answer. His hand hovered over his sidearm, not drawing the weapon, just bracing himself for whatever might come next. The figure paused at the base of the mesa slope, seeming to regard them with invisible eyes. Then it vanished, not walked away into the darkness, not ran. It simply blinked out of existence like a light being switched off. Dragon stepped forward slowly, almost against his will, as if pulled by a force he couldn't explain or resist. He scanned the ridge methodically, ordered the others to fall back to a safe distance, and attempted to radio base. But the radio shrieked with a metallic warping noise that made both men cover their ears in pain. After the interference finally cleared, Dragon spoke only 2 words into the radio. "Shut it down!" The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened, but everyone on the crew noticed the fundamental change in him. He stared at the mesa longer during his patrol. He stopped joking with the camera crew, and something deep inside him had shifted permanently. Several weeks after the ridge encounter, Dragon was working late, reviewing drone footage alone in the command trailer, what he used to call his safe place. Nothing strange ever happened in that trailer. No cold spots, no equipment failures, no unexplained shadows. It was the one building on the entire property that everyone trusted implicitly. But one night, shortly after midnight, as Dragon sat reviewing surveillance footage in complete solitude, every monitor in front of him froze simultaneously on the exact same frame, a frame that by all logic shouldn't have existed. On every screen, from every camera angle throughout the property, the footage showed the exact same impossible image, a silhouette standing directly behind Dragon inside the trailer, only a few feet from where he currently sat. It wasn't tall or monstrous in the traditional sense, but the proportions were fundamentally wrong, too long, too narrow. The angles bent unnaturally, like something was wearing the shape of a human being, didn't understand how to properly fit inside it. Dragon spun around instantly, hand reaching for his weapon, every muscle tensed for confrontation, but nothing was there. The space behind him was completely empty, yet the air in that spot was ice cold, almost wet, like he'd suddenly opened a freezer door in a humid room. The monitors flickered erratically. The silhouette disappeared from the screen. Then, one by one in sequence, each screen began replaying the last 2 seconds of footage backward without any input from Dragon whatsoever. He hit keys frantically, slammed the power button repeatedly, physically yanked cables from their connection, but it didn't matter. Nothing he did made any difference. The screen stayed on, continuing to play impossibly reversed footage of something standing in the exact spot where he had been sitting moments before. The distortion formed a kind of outline around the figure, like static electricity was tracing its edges, but the face was the absolute worst part, blurred and smeared like wet paint dragged across canvas, except 2 dark hollows stared out from the center of it, watching him with terrible focus, evaluating him like a specimen. By the time the system finally powered down completely, Dragon was shaken in a way no one on the crew had ever witnessed before. When the tech team checked all the equipment the next morning, they found absolutely nothing. No corrupted files, no glitch logs, no abnormal activity recorded anywhere in the system. There was no trace of the silhouette, no evidence the monitors had ever malfunctioned, no proof that anything unusual had happened at all. But Dragon knew exactly what he had seen, and from that night forward, he absolutely refused to stay in the command trailer alone under any circumstances. The breaking point came during what should have been just another routine nighttime perimeter sweep. Dragon had completed hundreds of these walks over the years, checking fence lines, monitoring sensors, logging wildlife activity. It was muscle memory by that point. But this particular night, the air felt fundamentally wrong from the moment he stepped outside. Even the other security personnel later admitted they could feel it too. A heaviness pressing down on everything, like the entire ranch was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Halfway through the sweep, Dragon radioed in with something unusual. His voice wasn't panicked, not yet, but it carried an edge the team wasn't accustomed to hearing from him. "Do you copy? I'm getting movement near Sector C, but it's not tripping any of the ground sensors." The command team immediately checked the monitoring system. Dragon was absolutely right. No alerts, no thermal spikes, no motion detection, nothing registering on any equipment, but he kept whispering into the radio that something was pacing him through the trees, staying just barely out of direct sight. He said he could hear it clearly. Slow, deliberate steps, the sound of boots crunching on dirt, the soft push and snap of branches being moved aside. But the thermal drone circling overhead showed only Dragon's heat signature, nothing else. Without warning or explanation, he stopped answering the radio entirely. The command trailer erupted with noise, everyone shouting, scrambling, trying desperately to reach him. By the time the rapid response team arrived at the far corner of the property, they found Dragon standing perfectly still beside the old cottonwood tree near the ravine. His flashlight hung loosely in his hand, beam pointed uselessly at the ground. His pupils were massively dilated despite the bright lights now surrounding him. His breathing was shallow and rapid, like someone who had just witnessed something that shattered their understanding of reality. One of the crew members called his name repeatedly. Dragon didn't react at all. It wasn't until Thomas physically grabbed his shoulder and shook him that Dragon finally snapped out of whatever trance held him, gasping desperately like someone who'd been held underwater for too long. When they frantically asked what had happened, what he'd seen out there in the darkness, he didn't answer coherently. He just kept shaking his head violently, whispering over and over, "You didn't see it. You didn't see what was standing there." The team searched the entire area methodically. No footprints in the soft earth, no thermal traces lingering, no broken branches, absolutely nothing that could explain the absolute terror still trembling through Dragon's body. But when they later reviewed Dragon's body cam footage, something even more deeply unsettling emerged from the recording. At the exact moment Dragon stopped responding to radio calls, the microphone picked up a faint clicking noise in the background, completely unnatural. Not an animal sound, not machinery, something else entirely. Something that seemed to be responding directly to his presence. Then underneath the clicking, barely audible, a low, distorted whisper emerged. Audio technicians tried desperately to isolate the sound, filter it, enhance it, understand its origin. But the deeper they analyzed the waveform, the stranger it became. The pattern wasn't consistent with any known human voice. It wasn't mechanical interference. It existed somewhere in between, something that shouldn't be possible. When they showed Dragon the isolated audio clip, he refused to listen to it. After the terrifying incident incident at the cottonwood tree, Dragon attempted to return to his normal work routine as if nothing significant had happened. But the crew immediately noticed something had fundamentally changed. He was more guarded than ever before, more restless, constantly looking over his shoulder. And for the first time since joining the team years ago, Dragon started keeping critical information off the official record. It began when he insisted on reviewing all overnight surveillance footage completely alone, arriving hours before the rest of the team each morning. At first, nobody questioned this behavior. They assumed he was simply trying to make sense of his recent experiences, searching for patterns or explanations. But then the system logs revealed something deeply odd and concerning. Several files had been accessed, viewed multiple times, and then manually copied into a heavily encrypted folder under Dragon's personal login credential, footage that was suddenly no longer accessible to anyone else on the team, including Brandon Fugal himself. When confronted about this unusual behavior, Dragon brushed it off dismissively as routine security archiving, standard protocol for sensitive material. But the explanation didn't sit right with anyone. He had never done anything like this before in all his years on the property, and he certainly had never locked the investigative team out of potentially crucial data. Then came the night that truly alarmed everyone. Brandon Fugal himself flew in urgently from Salt Lake City, responding to a private message Dragon had sent him directly, bypassing all normal communication channels. The cameras caught their silhouettes inside the command trailer late that night, voices deliberately muted, door firmly locked from the inside. No one on the crew ever learned what Dragon showed Brandon during that secret meeting, but when Brandon finally emerged hours later, he looked visibly rattled, shaken in a way the ranch had never affected him before despite years of bizarre occurrences. The only real clue came from the drone operator, who later swore under oath that he saw Dragon carefully carrying a small metal case out to his personal truck later that evening, something he had retrieved from the restricted storage room where only the highest level evidence was kept under lock and key. Whatever was contained inside that case, Dragon handled it with extreme care, placing it gently on the passenger seat as if it were fragile or dangerous, and then drove off the property without explaining anything to anyone. The next morning when he returned, Dragon was pale, visibly exhausted, and absolutely refusing to discuss where he had gone or what he had done with the contents of that case. But the change in him was unmistakable and deeply troubling. Dragon had always been strict, intense, occasionally paranoid about security, but now he was something else entirely. He was genuinely afraid, not of intruders or trespassers or even the unknown phenomena. He was terrified of something specific, something the ranch had shown him, something he had locked in that metal case, something he desperately feared would change everything if it ever became public knowledge. And from that day forward, Dragon stopped trusting the ranch's monitoring systems entirely. He stopped trusting the investigation's methodology and conclusions. And worst of all, he stopped trusting the crew members he had worked alongside for years. The night everything finally fell apart began quietly enough. The team was gathered in the command center, carefully reviewing anomalies from the previous night's investigation, when one of the central monitors suddenly flickered without warning, just for a single second, barely noticeable. But in that brief moment, the screen displayed something that sent ice through everyone's veins, a frame that absolutely should not exist anywhere in their footage. On the monitor, clear as day, was an image showing a silhouette standing directly behind Dragon in footage recorded the previous night. Tall, unnaturally thin, completely featureless, and Dragon had never reported seeing anyone or anything during that patrol. When Dragon walked into the command center moments later and immediately saw the frozen image still displayed on the screen, he went completely rigid. Every muscle in his body tensed. For several long seconds, he didn't even appear to breathe. "That wasn't there," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Travis stepped forward carefully, studying both the screen and Dragon's reaction. "Dragon, that figure was standing directly behind you in this footage. Are you seriously telling us you didn't see anything unusual during this patrol?" "No," Dragon snapped defensively, but the crack in his voice completely betrayed him. He was lying, or he was in denial, or something far worse. Then the command center radios suddenly hissed with harsh static. Everyone in the room turned toward the speakers simultaneously. A voice whispered through the interference, broken and distant, seemingly impossible to pinpoint or identify. At first, it sounded like random interference, atmospheric noise, radio bounce. Then, unmistakably, crystal clear despite the static, it formed a single word: Brian. The entire team immediately looked at Dragon. His real name, his birth name, only a small handful of people in his entire life ever called him that. Everyone on the ranch knew him exclusively as Dragon. The radio crackled again, louder this time. The whisper stretched and distorted, taking on an unnatural quality, almost mocking in its tone as it that repeated his name slowly. Brian. Dragon stood completely frozen, his jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck stood out. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself. "That's not normal interference," Travis said quietly, stating the obvious that everyone was thinking. Dragon didn't answer. He couldn't answer. He just stared at the radio speaker, breathing hard through clenched teeth, looking like he was holding back either rage or panic or both. Then the whisper returned one final time, clearer than before, and every single hair on the back of Dragon's neck visibly stood up. 2 words that would haunt him forever. "Behind you." Dragon spun around so violently and so fast that he knocked over an expensive equipment chair, sending it crashing to the floor. Nothing was there. The space behind him was completely empty, but the precise moment he turned, the entire command center's temperature dropped at least 20 degrees in seconds. People's breath became visible. The monitoring cameras flickered erratically, and then the same silhouette from the frozen footage appeared again, but this time on a live feed broadcasting in real time, standing in the exact spot where Dragon had been positioned just seconds before. When Dragon saw his own image on the screen with that thing standing where he'd just been, he whispered something that absolutely no one on the crew had ever heard from him before in all their years working together. "I'm done." And for the first time in the entire recorded history of the show, Dragon turned and walked out of the command center without completing a security lockdown protocol. Dragon didn't return to the command center that night. He stayed outside alone, pacing the dirt road toward the gate. Every few minutes he would stop, turn sharply, and stare into the tree line like he expected something to step out. The team watched from monitors, unsure whether to intervene. By sunrise, Dragon was sitting on his truck's tailgate, shoulders slumped, staring at the ground. When Travis approached, Dragon didn't look up. "It's not the ranch," he muttered. "It's me." Travis frowned. "What does that mean?" Dragon took a long breath. "This place doesn't follow you. It chooses you, and something out there chose me a long time ago." He explained that before the show ever aired, before Brandon bought the ranch, something appeared to him on the West Ridge, a shimmering distortion that moved without sound. He never filed a report, never told anyone. "It watched me," he whispered, like it already knew everything about me. The team listened in stunned silence. "And now it's back," he said. "It's following me again." When the crew prepared for the next investigation, Dragon didn't suit up. He walked to Brandon's truck, dropped his security badge on the hood, and said only one sentence: "If I stay here, it won't stop." He climbed into his truck and drove toward the gate. The cameras caught one final shot in his rearview mirror. His face pale, eyes fixed on the mesa behind him. 1 week after Dragon drove off Skinwalker Ranch for the final time, Brandon Fugal quietly confirmed what everyone already knew. Dragon had officially stepped away. No contract dispute, no salary negotiation. He left because something wasn't just observing him anymore. It was calling him by name. But leaving didn't end it. According to those who've seen him since, Dragon's life has become unrecognizable. He lives alone now, far from Utah, in a location he refuses to reveal. Friends say he's reclusive, distrustful of electronics, paranoid about being watched. He checks windows obsessively. He sleeps with lights on. He refuses to discuss the ranch. One former crew member reached him by phone last year. Dragon answered but said only 3 words before hanging up: "It's still here." Others report he's moved multiple times, always at night, always without warning, like he's running from something that won't let go. The tragedy of Bryant Arnold isn't that he left Skinwalker Ranch. It's that part of the ranch left with him. And no matter how far he runs, whatever chose him that night on the West Ridge is still watching, still waiting, still calling his name in the dark. During a laser experiment on Skinwalker Ranch, crew members were physically attacked by an unknown force. Dr. Travis Taylor was thrown backward. Eric Bard collapsed with radiation exposure. Multiple injuries required hospitalization. Medical records confirmed the damage. The footage captured it all. Subscribe for the full investigation into what attacked Brandon Fugal's team. The investigation that would result in the most violent incident in Skinwalker Ranch history began with what seemed like a straightforward scientific experiment designed by Dr. Travis Taylor to test a controversial hypothesis about the anomaly zone above the property. For months, the team had documented strange phenomena occurring in the airspace directly above the mesa: unexplained radar returns, GPS failures, and electromagnetic disturbances that defied conventional explanation. Travis theorized that whatever caused these anomalies might be responsive to specific frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, particularly high-powered laser emissions in the infrared spectrum. Brandon Fugal approved a significant budget expenditure to acquire military-grade laser equipment capable of projecting concentrated beams into the anomaly zone at precise frequencies, Travis had calculated based on previous sensor data. The experiment was ambitious and potentially groundbreaking. If successful, it could provide the first reproducible method for triggering and studying the phenomena under controlled conditions rather than waiting for spontaneous occurrences. The setup took an entire day, with Travis personally overseeing the installation of laser arrays, sensor equipment, and recording devices positioned across the mesa to capture data from multiple angles simultaneously. Brandon invited additional scientific observers, including physicists and aerospace engineers, to witness the experiment and provide independent verification of results. The atmosphere was one of excitement and anticipation rather than concern. Nobody on the team believed they were doing anything particularly dangerous. They'd conducted dozens of experiments at the ranch without incident, and this seemed like just another data collection opportunity using more sophisticated equipment than previous investigations. The experiment was scheduled for early evening when atmospheric conditions were optimal and the setting sun wouldn't interfere with laser visibility. As the team assembled on the mesa and Travis began the activation sequence for the laser array, everyone felt confident this would be a routine scientific investigation that might yield interesting data. Within minutes, that confidence would be shattered as something responded to their laser emissions with immediate and violent hostility. The footage from that evening shows the exact moment when scientific curiosity crossed a boundary into genuine danger, triggering a response from whatever intelligence or phenomenon exists at Skinwalker Ranch that proved it could and would defend itself against perceived threats with physical force. Dr. Travis Taylor was operating the primary laser control station, making fine adjustments to beam frequency and intensity while monitoring real-time sensor feedback displayed on multiple laptop screens arrayed before him. The footage shows Travis focused intently on his work, calling out technical observations to the team about electromagnetic readings that were beginning to spike in ways consistent with his theoretical predictions. For approximately 8 minutes, the experiment proceeded exactly as planned. The lasers were projecting into the anomaly zone, sensors were collecting data, and cameras were recording everything from multiple angles for later analysis. Then something changed. Travis noticed a sudden surge in electromagnetic readings that exceeded anything the equipment was designed to measure, causing several sensors to overload and shut down automatically. He reached for the laser controls to reduce power output, concerned that the equipment was malfunctioning or that they were inadvertently creating a feedback loop. Before Travis could touch the controls, he was violently struck by an invisible force that witnesses describe as impossibly powerful. The camera footage captures the moment in disturbing clarity. Travis is standing normally one instant, then the next. He's thrown backwards several feet, as if hit by a massive unseen impact. His body leaves the ground entirely before crashing into equipment behind him with enough force to damage the metal cases and cause Travis to cry out in obvious pain. The entire incident occurs in less than 2 seconds, but the violence and power behind whatever struck him is undeniable on the footage. Team members rushed to Travis immediately, finding him dazed and struggling to breathe from what appeared to be blunt force trauma to his chest and abdomen. When they helped him to his feet and examined him, visible injuries were already forming, dark bruising across his torso in a pattern that suggested impact from a large focused force rather than falling against equipment edges. Travis insisted he hadn't tripped or lost his balance. Something had physically hit him with tremendous power from a direction where nothing visible existed on any camera angle. Brandon Fugal made the immediate decision to shut down the laser array and secure Travis medical attention, but before the team could begin powering down equipment, the situation escalated dramatically as additional crew members came under attack. Eric Bard was positioned approximately 30 yards from Travis at a secondary monitoring station, collecting spectrographic data and observing atmospheric changes during the laser experiment. When Travis was attacked, Eric had immediately started moving toward him to provide assistance, but before he'd covered half the distance, he suddenly stopped, staggered, and collapsed to his knees, clutching his head and upper body. The footage shows Eric's collapse happening within seconds of Travis being struck, suggesting a coordinated assault on multiple team members rather than isolated incidents. Crew members who reached Eric first found him in severe distress. He was vomiting. His skin was flushed and hot to the touch, and he reported intense burning sensations across his exposed skin areas, including his face, neck, and hands. The symptoms were consistent with acute radiation exposure, which seemed impossible given that no radiation sources were present in the experiment beyond normal background levels. Eric was clearly in worse condition than Travis, unable to stand without support and exhibiting signs of shock, including rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing, and disorientation about where he was and what had happened. Brandon ordered immediate evacuation and called for emergency medical response, recognizing this had escalated beyond anything the team's first aid training could handle. While waiting for paramedics, team members noticed something disturbing. Eric's exposed skin areas were developing visible burns that appeared to be progressing in real time, starting as redness but darkening to second-degree burn appearance within minutes. Medical equipment the team had on site for monitoring crew health during investigations revealed elevated radiation readings on Eric's body and clothing that exceeded safe exposure limits. This was medically impossible. Radiation doesn't spontaneously appear on a person without a source, and there were no radioactive materials anywhere near the experiment site. When paramedics arrived and transported Eric to the hospital, emergency room physicians were baffled by his presentation. The burns, radiation readings, and systemic symptoms were consistent with significant radiation exposure, yet there was no logical source for such exposure. Eric's condition stabilized after several hours of treatment, but the medical mystery of how he'd been exposed to radiation in the middle of a Utah desert remained completely unexplained. The incident proved that whatever had attacked Travis hadn't stopped with a single victim. It had systematically targeted multiple team members with different forms of assault.
Brandon Fugal stood on the mesa watching two of his team members injured and possibly dying, facing the most difficult decision of his tenure as Skinwalker Ranch owner. As a successful businessman accustomed to calculated risks and data-driven decisions, Brandon now confronted a situation where no amount of wealth, planning, or expertise could guarantee his team's safety against threats that defied scientific explanation. His first instinct was immediate evacuation, get everyone off the mesa, shut down all experiments, and regroup once injuries were assessed and medical professionals provided guidance. But the scientist part of Brandon recognized they were documenting something unprecedented. Whatever had attacked Travis and Eric had responded to their experiment in ways that proved intelligence, awareness, and capability for physical interaction with humans. This was exactly the kind of breakthrough evidence the ranch had been seeking for decades, and abandoning the investigation meant potentially losing data that could never be replicated. The ethical calculation was brutal. Continue collecting data while people were being injured, or prioritize immediate safety over scientific discovery. Brandon made calls to medical consultants describing Eric's symptoms, seeking guidance on whether they were dealing with a medical emergency requiring immediate hospital transport or something that could be managed on-site while securing equipment and data. The responses were alarming. Radiation exposure severe enough to cause visible burns and systemic symptoms required immediate professional medical intervention and potentially weeks of monitoring for delayed effects, including organ damage and immune system compromise. There was no ethical justification for keeping Eric on the mesa 1 second longer than necessary for safe transport. Travis, despite his own injuries and obvious pain, argued for continuing the experiment. He recognized the scientific importance of what they were documenting and believed they could implement safety protocols to protect remaining team members while collecting additional data. Brandon overruled him, making the definitive call to shut down all equipment and evacuate to the command center. But even that decision proved complicated when something began attacking from above, making evacuation itself dangerous. Brandon found himself coordinating a retreat under hostile conditions from an enemy he couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't defend against using any conventional security measures. His background in real estate development and business management had prepared him for financial risks and complex negotiations, not tactical evacuation of personnel under assault from unexplained phenomena. As the team began shutting down equipment and preparing to evacuate the mesa, the attacks escalated in a way that suggested whatever they'd provoked was determined to prevent them from leaving, or perhaps to punish them for the laser experiment. Multiple crew members reported feeling impacts from above, not gentle touches or subjective sensations, but forceful strikes that knocked equipment from their hands and caused them to stumble or fall. The camera footage captures several incidents where objects and people appear to be struck by invisible forces from the empty sky above. One particularly dramatic sequence shows a heavy metal equipment case being lifted off the ground and thrown laterally across the mesa, traveling at least 15 feet before crashing down and breaking open. No wind, no visible force, just the case suddenly airborne and violently displaced. Physics alone made this impossible. The case weighed over 40 pounds and would require significant force applied at precise angles to achieve the trajectory captured on video. Crew members scrambled to secure equipment and themselves as the aerial assault continued. Sound equipment recorded bizarre audio during this period, deep rumbling sounds that seemed to come from directly overhead despite clear skies, high-pitched whining noises that hurt team members' ears and couldn't be isolated to any equipment source, and what several people described as a rhythmic pulsing that they felt physically in their chests, like standing near massive subwoofers at a concert. The coordinated nature of the attack suggested intelligence. Different crew members were being targeted with different types of assault simultaneously, as if something was observing their positions and choosing appropriate methods to harass or injure each person. Brandon's security personnel attempted to provide protection, but were helpless against threats they couldn't see or predict. One security officer was struck hard enough to knock his radio from his belt, the device skittering across the mesa as if kicked by an invisible foot. Another reported feeling hands pushing against his back, trying to force him toward the mesa's edge, though no one was near him, and footage confirmed he was isolated from other team members. The psychological terror of being under attack from unseen forces was as damaging as the physical impacts. Trained security professionals accustomed to assessing and responding to threats found themselves completely ineffective against an enemy that violated every assumption about how physical reality operates. While chaos unfolded on the mesa, Ranch Superintendent Thomas Winterton and Chief Security Officer Bryant Arnold were positioned at the ranch perimeter, monitoring access points and maintaining communication with the investigation team. Their experience that night proved the attacks weren't confined to the Mesa experiment site, but were happening simultaneously across different areas of the property. Thomas was conducting a routine perimeter check in his vehicle when he reported via radio that he was being followed by something he couldn't see, but could hear moving through brush parallel to the road. The sound was too large and too coordinated to be wildlife, and it maintained pace with his vehicle even as he accelerated. When Thomas stopped to investigate with spotlights, he saw nothing. But the moment he turned off his vehicle's lights, he heard what he described as footsteps approaching his position from multiple directions simultaneously, as if he was being surrounded. His radio transmission to Bryant captured genuine fear in his voice as he requested immediate backup. Bryant responded in his security vehicle but experienced catastrophic equipment failure en route. His radio cut out mid-transmission. His vehicle's electrical system began malfunctioning with lights flickering and engine sputtering, and his GPS navigation showed his location as somewhere over 100 miles away. Despite being on ranch property he'd driven countless times, the equipment failures left Bryant stranded and unable to reach Thomas or communicate with the command center. Both men were effectively isolated in darkness on a property where something was demonstrating hostile intent toward the investigation team. The most terrifying aspect of their experience was the physical attacks they endured while separated and vulnerable. Thomas reported being shoved hard enough to stumble while standing outside his vehicle trying to restart his radio. He felt distinct pressure against his chest and shoulders, as if invisible hands were pushing him. And when he retreated into his vehicle and turned on interior lights, he discovered fresh scratches on his arms that were bleeding and stinging. Bryant had similar experiences. Objects in his vehicle were knocked from their positions. His rearview mirror was violently twisted sideways, and he felt repeated impacts against the vehicle's exterior as if something was striking the doors and hood with considerable force. The radio eventually came back online with Bryant and Thomas both reporting to Brandon that they were under attack and requesting permission to evacuate the property entirely. The physical evidence from the Skinwalker Ranch attacks provided undeniable proof that something had caused genuine harm to multiple team members, documented through medical records that would stand up to legal and scientific scrutiny. Eric Bard's hospital evaluation revealed radiation exposure levels that triggered mandatory reporting to federal authorities who monitor such incidents for public safety and national security purposes. His radiation readings measured at levels consistent with proximity to industrial radioactive sources or medical radiation equipment, yet no such sources existed anywhere near the ranch during the experiment. The burns on Eric's skin were classified as second-degree thermal and radiation burns, requiring specialized treatment including topical medications and monitoring for infection. Blood work showed elevated white blood cell counts and other markers consistent with the body's response to radiation damage, effects that typically take hours or days to appear but manifested in Eric within minutes of exposure. Medical professionals who treated Eric documented their findings with the caveat that the exposure source remained unknown and unexplained, unusual language in medical records that typically identify specific causes for injuries. Travis Taylor's injuries were equally well documented, though different in nature. X-rays revealed soft tissue trauma across his chest and abdomen, consistent with blunt force impact from a large object striking him with significant velocity. The bruising patterns were photographed and measured, showing an impact zone approximately 12 inches in diameter, centered on his sternum and spreading across his ribs. Sports medicine specialists consulted about the injuries compared them to impacts seen in football players hit by tackles or martial artists struck during full contact sparring, the kind of damage that requires substantial force delivered by something solid. What made Travis's injuries medically puzzling was the absence of corresponding external trauma. When someone is hit hard enough to cause that level of internal bruising, there's typically skin abrasions, cuts, or surface damage from whatever struck them. Travis had none of that. His skin was intact except for the deep bruising, as if he'd been hit by something that could deliver tremendous force without surface friction or cutting edges. Thomas Winterton and Brian Arnold's scratches were examined by medical staff and photographed for documentation. The scratch patterns were analyzed and determined to be consistent with fingernail or claw marks rather than contact with equipment edges or vegetation. The injuries were fresh, appearing during the investigation period, and located on body areas that were covered by clothing when the men left the command center. Dr. Travis Taylor, despite his own injuries, immediately began analyzing the data collected during the attack, determined to find scientific explanations for what had happened to him and his team members. His preliminary analysis revealed electromagnetic anomalies that correlated precisely with the timing of each physical attack, suggesting a connection between energy phenomena and the violence experienced by the crew. During the 8 minutes of laser operation before Travis was struck, sensors detected a progressive buildup of electromagnetic energy in the anomaly zone at frequencies that matched the laser emissions, but at amplitudes exponentially higher than what the equipment was producing. Travis theorized they'd inadvertently created a resonance effect where the laser energy was being amplified by something in the atmosphere or space above the mesa, building to levels that triggered a defensive or retaliatory response from whatever generates the phenomena. The moment of Travis's attack corresponded exactly with a massive electromagnetic pulse detected by equipment positioned around the mesa. The pulse registered across multiple sensor types simultaneously. Magnetometers, RF spectrum analyzers, and electric field detectors all recorded spikes that exceeded their measurement capabilities by orders of magnitude. The pulse originated from a point in the anomaly zone directly above where Travis was standing and propagated outward in a focused beam rather than radiating equally in all directions. This directional characteristic suggested intentional targeting rather than random energy discharge. Eric Bard's radiation exposure remained the most scientifically puzzling aspect because radiation detectors positioned around the mesa showed no elevated readings in the environment, only on Eric's body and clothing after his collapse. Travis hypothesized that Eric had been exposed to a highly localized and brief burst of radiation, intense enough to cause damage, but short-lived enough to dissipate before environmental sensors could detect it. This would require technology or natural phenomena capable of generating and directing radiation with precision that exceeded any known human capability. The aerial assault phase showed even more interesting data. High-speed cameras captured frame-by-frame sequences of objects being displaced, and careful analysis revealed subtle atmospheric distortions at the moment of impact, like heat shimmer or gravitational lensing effects that indicated something was present, even if not directly visible. Travis believed they were observing camouflaged or phase-shifted matter that could interact physically with normal matter, while remaining largely invisible to human perception and most sensor types. The violent attacks during the Mesa experiment fundamentally transformed how Brandon Fugal approaches investigations at Skinwalker Ranch, implementing safety protocols that acknowledge the genuine physical dangers posed by whatever phenomena exist on the property. The most immediate change was mandatory medical monitoring for all personnel during investigations. Team members now wear biosensors that continuously track heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, and radiation exposure, with real-time data transmitted to medical personnel stationed at the command center who can order immediate evacuation if dangerous physiological changes are detected. Brandon invested in a mobile medical unit permanently stationed at the ranch, equipped with emergency treatment capabilities and staffed by paramedics trained in radiation exposure response, trauma care, and psychological crisis intervention. The unit includes equipment to measure and document radiation levels on individuals, allowing immediate assessment of exposure risks. All investigation plans now undergo safety review by an independent committee including physicians, radiation safety experts, and security professionals who assess potential risks and recommend protective measures before experiments are approved. High-risk investigations require written, informed consent from all participants, acknowledging specific dangers and agreeing they understand experiments might trigger hostile responses from unknown phenomena. Brandon also implemented tactical withdrawal protocols, predetermined evacuation routes, rally points, and communication procedures for situations where investigations need to be abandoned quickly under potentially hostile conditions. Security personnel receive training in protecting team members from threats that may not be visible or predictable using conventional security methods. The psychological impact on team members has been significant and ongoing. Travis Taylor, despite being a trained scientist comfortable with uncertainty and unexplained phenomena, admits the experience changed his perspective on Skinwalker Ranch investigations. He's more cautious now about experiments that might be perceived as aggressive or threatening by whatever intelligence or phenomenon exists at the ranch, recognizing that their laser experiment may have crossed a boundary that provoked retaliation. Some crew members requested transfers to other projects after witnessing the attacks, unwilling to continue working at a location where they might be physically harmed by forces they can't understand or defend against. Brandon has made counseling resources available to all staff and doesn't pressure anyone to participate in investigations they're uncomfortable with.